Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of the Finance Feed podcast. My name is Nikolai Isayev. I'm the editor in chief of Finance Feeds. Joining me today is William Klippel. He's the head of sales at Capitalise.ai. William, thanks for joining us. Welcome.
Hey Nick, how's it going?
Great. Listen, you and I go way back. I don't even remember when we saw each other last. I wanted to start off by asking how your summer's been. Where have you primarily been living recently, and kind of what's been going on?
Yeah, it's funny. So I'm based out of New York City, so in New Jersey, but just a few miles on the other side of the Hudson. And yeah, this summer's been great. It's kind of been the first summer back to traveling, kind of at full capacity. So we're kind of making up for lost time, but it's flown by. I think I would say it kind of started at Bitcoin 2022 in Miami,
Hmm.
which was back in April, but then from there went to California for a week with the family. Then we were in Austin for Consensus, another big crypto event, and then traveled some up in the East Coast. Went up to Cape Cod for a week. Went back home to St. Louis to see some family. So really took full advantage of traveling this summer. So looking forward to kind of pumping the brakes a little bit this fall if I can.
Nice. And what was your experience from, like you mentioned, Blockchain 2022 and Consensus? These are really big conferences, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was interesting because so Bitcoin 2022 in Miami was in April, which is before everything had kind of hit the fan in terms of some of the fallout that we saw with like places like Voyager and the Three Arrows Capital debacle and kind of everything in between. So the tone there was quite a bit different than Consensus in Austin, which was in June, which is when all of this news had already broken, right? And so people were dealing with the aftermath of that to some extent. Both conferences were really exciting, interesting, great forums for meeting people and also for just learning about the industry and making those connections. So if you get a chance, I would highly recommend both those conferences are fantastic.
hmm Yeah, I have to find some time to make it out to some of these. As you know, I'm not necessarily that immersed in crypto as you are, I'm sure, and
Hmm.
so, but definitely need to find the time to try to attend one of these in the future. Well, I'm glad that you're taking full advantage of the summer in terms of the weather and business and
Yeah,
everything else.
yeah, exactly.
Um, so, listen, full disclosure for our listeners, you and I worked at Gain Capital for many years. If people take a look at our LinkedIn profiles and make the
Yeah, yeah.
connection, we worked out of the New York City office on Wall Street. We worked in Jersey City and Bedminster and things like that. And I think you and I have a similar sort of um, a connection in the sense that after we had left our relative or respective roles at Gain, I believe both you and I worked remotely. So, like out of the office, we didn't necessarily have an office to specifically go to for a particular period of time. I don't know if that continues to be the case for you. It certainly is the case for me. I mean, I enjoy, not having to travel to a physical office anymore.
Yeah.
If it's the same for you or previously, if you had worked from home, do you think you would ever want to go back, to a full-time office environment?
Yeah, it's funny. So Capitalize .ai is based in Tel Aviv. I'm in the New York City area. So by default, I'm working remote full time at the moment. As we continue to grow and add headcount, I could envision a time where we may utilize a physical space in and around the New York City area. But even at that point, I don't think I'd go back to full time in the office. I do think I do miss certain aspects of the office. As much as I don't miss having a commute, I do miss almost being forced to have that time in the morning and in the afternoon where you're kind of having to be away from the computer screen and having to have time with your thoughts, and kind of it's almost like forced meditation to some extent, right? Depending
Hmm.
on your commute. With that said, I do prefer remote. I think it's a good thing, and if you can balance it out between other priorities like family and everything else. It's a big benefit. I've got two kids. My daughter's 9. My son just turned 4. And, when my daughter was younger, I was always commuting to either the city or to New Jersey, and I missed a lot of moments that I've gotten to have with my son because I've been working remote while he was a little kid, and so that's a big benefit, I think.
That's great. Awesome. I would tell you that I feel the same way in the sense that the commuting, like you said, there is that sort of time off where you're limited to what you could be doing. I mean, it probably depends on if you have to be on a train or public transport versus actually
Right. It makes a big difference.
like driving a car. But I feel like, I mean, there's pluses and minuses to both scenarios. And I'm just kind of like, well, I'm not sure how I would be able to, if somebody forced me to be in a full-time office role, whether or not that commute is long or short.
I definitely think that'll weigh into future discussions for most people's careers, right?
Yeah, it kind of feels that way, and I'm seeing some stuff on the news. It's out. There's obviously sort of this debate or anxiety in the business world whether or not companies will either ask employees to go back or force employees to go back with some sort of sanctions, and how do employees react to that, and what are they ultimately going to do? It seems like companies have tried to get employees back into the office at least on a part-time schedule, but it seems like there has been a lot of a pushback from employees, whether or not they don't want to commute to the office at all, or they just don't they don't want to be in an office full time anymore. It's just a new reality, I guess.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a recruitment tool, I think. For sure.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned Capitalise. I'm familiar with what Capitalise offers to brokers and traders, but our audience may not. So I was wondering if you can give us a quick overview of the services that Capitalise provides today, and really how it's evolved over the last few years as a code-free trading automation tool.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you kind of the quick and dirty version of the product, but basically, it's a natural language processing layer, English text input over algorithmic trading. So what that means is that, unlike most code-free or no-code automation tools, where you're dragging and dropping, templates, things like that. This really is just like sending a text, right? So you can say, I want to buy, $10,000 worth of euro if the non-farm payroll number comes out better than expected, and just type that in English text, and away you go. It handles fundamental news release. It handles technical. It's got a wide variety of ways that you can phrase things. And it's incredibly intuitive for users. So we've partnered. We're asset class agnostic. So I mentioned before, I've been going to crypto events. We do a lot with crypto exchanges like Binance, FTX, and a handful of others. We've also onboarded a number of FX and CFD brokers. So FXCM, Interactive Brokers, ACY Securities, Pepperstone. The list kind of goes on. In fact, you mentioned Gain Capital, which of course Forex.com is their premier brand that we used to work together at. We actually just finished integrating with Forex.com, and we'll be announcing a partnership with them probably around the same time that this podcast drops. So nice. I would expect it to come out, in just a couple of weeks, if not sooner. So be on the lookout for that.
Mm-hmm. And is there any sort of new features that you guys have rolled out, maybe in the last, 12 months, a year? I'm just sort of thinking about when was the last time that I took a deep dive into Capitalise.ai?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that question, because we come up with new features like literally every month, and they're always trader driven. So we have a very good process in place where traders will submit feedback to us, and in conjunction with getting feedback from our existing partners, some of which that I just mentioned, we constantly evolve the product. So probably the biggest feature that we rolled out in the last 12 months was instantaneous backtesting. Right now, if you created a strategy, in just plain English text, and you wrote, I want to know if I want to buy, 100,000, Bitcoin every time the 200-day moving average crosses the 50-day moving average, you can just, with the click of a button on either your mobile app or on the web platform, you can then run a simple back test to say, what would this strategy have done over the last, say 90 days, right? How many times would it have hit? What would have been the P&L implications? How many trades would have been executed? How many of those trades would have been winners? How many of them would have been losers? And you'll get those results back in, 10, 15 seconds. So it's incredibly powerful. I like to think that this tool has democratized algo trading to some extent, because now you don't have to know how to code to create a strategy, and you don't have to be a quant in order to test that strategy. So it's very, very powerful.
Awesome. That sounds really, really, really cool. And in terms of integrations that are available for brokers, I did see, FXCM using your service. I think you mentioned Pepperstone as well. Am I understanding correctly that, again, every broker is different? Some brokers have customers that are trading one product set, let's say, for the most part, or in majority terms, and then others have different types of clients. Obviously, everybody's got their own branding and colors and front end and back end.
Yep.
Is all of this sort of all of these criteria and all of these requirements for these brokers? Is it quite flexible for you guys to work individually and come up with a more customized solutions for them depending on what their needs are?
Yeah, exactly. So we do a number of different things, but every integration is bespoke. We tap into that broker or exchange's data, their market data. So we can offer every single product that they offer. So once we add a relationship, we have that product available on our platform just by pulling it from the API. It doesn't matter if it's a Fix API, a REST API, WebSocket API, if it's a MetaTrader broker. We have a lot of different ways that we can connect. We create kind of co-branded versions of our platform that are in the color scheme and logo of that specific broker. And yeah, like I said, we work across a bunch of different asset classes. We actually just launched with Fidelity, a big equities broker in the US, obviously, to launch smart notifications and backtesting directly within their Active Trader Pro platform. So that came out with their latest platform release, which was just a few weeks ago. So really exciting partnerships that are coming out.
Really cool. I'm glad to hear it. That's pretty awesome. Taking a look at who you are as a person and sort of some of your experience in the industry. I know today you're actually an active trader yourself, right? You trade on a maybe on a daily or somewhat regular basis. So I wanted to actually get your take and your opinion on the so-called gamification of trading and democratization, which you actually just mentioned about Capitalise.ai, like democratizing algo trading. It's something that we've seen, a trend that we've seen over the last 2 years. On the one hand, we see retail shops, primarily equity shops, I would say, like Robinhood, like Webull, making it very, very easy for novice traders or really anybody to come into the market and start trading equities, right? Very easy to use tools or platforms, very simple, nothing too intimidating, right? That someone has to learn. That's on the one side, and then on the other side, we have what we refer to, or I refer to as gamification. We have basically social trading in a sense. We have things like Wall Street Bets subreddits and other groups online, packs of people, traders who are basically, I don't want to, it might sound bad, but they're kind of colluding with each other, right? They're basically saying, okay, let's invest, let's put our money into this stock or that stock, and really kind of try to maybe pump and dump it, if we can call it that. Again, looking for your impressions on all these terms, right, that people have used over the last 2 years to describe this phenomenon. What's your impression of everything that's been going on? Kind of, do you see this as a net positive for the industry, for trading, for investors? Are there some negative aspects to this?
Like everything, there is certainly a double-edged sword to some extent, right? So the ease of use and the ease of access is really, really key. And the fact that you're able to open up opportunities to people all over the world to invest in a way that they wouldn't have been able to previously. So like fractional shares, I think, is a really good example of something that truly does democratize access to the equities markets, right? And if you take yourself out of thinking about living in the United States, but to other countries, other regions, the thought of trying to buy a share of Amazon, for $1,000 is daunting, right? But if you can fractionalize those shares, then all of a sudden someone can participate in that market that wasn't previously able to do so. So I do think that there's some real positive things that you touched upon. The negative side of this is that you can get yourself, if it's too gamified, you can get yourself into really dangerous situations where you have people that are using products that are over levered, that are complex, that they don't understand the complexities, specifically with like options trading. You can really end up in a pear-shaped situation because of the lack of education, and really people not being qualified to transact in the way that they are. So it is a double-edged sword. I think in general, I like the idea of trying to remove barriers to entry in a way to diversify access across people from different walks of life and give everyone the ability to participate in some degree within the financial markets. Ideally that creates a more equitable environment and gets rid of some of the gap that has grown over the last few decades, especially in this country. But it is a double-edged sword.
And I think, what you just mentioned with respect to perhaps novice traders not necessarily getting enough education or understanding what they're doing. What comes to my mind is meme stocks, right? AMC,
Sure.
GameStop, Bed Bath and Beyond,
Yep.
Hertz. Hertz, I believe, was also one of them in the very beginning. What's your take on these actual stocks? Like, were they ever in your portfolio? And let's say if they were, were you actually first like studying fundamentals in terms of like the individual stocks, or was it purely a bullish play because you're like, oh, it's look, it's probably gonna go up because there's so much interest to go long from people. I might as well go in for the ride.
Yeah. So the short answer to that is that I never got on board with the meme stocks when they were meme stocks. I actually did, going back, I want to say about 13 or 14 years ago, own GameStop, but when it was actually like a legitimate fundamental play where it was based around the fact that they were actually scaling up and we're doing some interesting things potentially within gaming, and I held that stock for a little while and then unloaded it at a small profit. But that was, probably a decade and a half ago or something like that. I have not gotten into any of the meme stock bonanza lately. I mean, truthfully, I am an active trader. I trade a bunch of different asset classes. But like my hold times, my duration times I'm not a day trader. So I'm not really looking to try to hop on a trade like what we've seen with Bed Bath and Beyond most recently.
Sure. Okay. Makes sense. Cool. And going along with that in terms of trading, you're a self-described cryptocurrency connoisseur. At least that's what that's one of the descriptions I saw on your LinkedIn profile. So listen, a lot of people, and you know this as well, a lot of people have labeled what's been going on with crypto in general, both the weakness in the price of crypto assets and also some of the things that are going on the corporate side of things for crypto companies in general. Some people have labeled, or a lot of people have labeled this as crypto winter in the media and some of the, let's say, crypto influencers out there. For me and this podcast, it's sort of a topic of debate. Some of my guests really feel like this is actually an opportunity going forward to learn from, one of my guests, he actually labeled what's been happening with Three Arrows, Celsius, and a few of these other companies as just they're toxic companies. This is toxic things that unfortunately happen from time to time, especially for asset classes that are fairly new or young, right? So
Yep.
in that way, that explains that part of the situation. And they feel like, some people feel like this is an opportunity to learn from the mistakes that have been made by, let's say, companies, individuals, whatever.
Hmm.
And also a lesson to be learned from the actual price movements or fluctuations that led up to the weakness that we see today, and sort of the narrow range that the most popular crypto assets are in today, right?
Yep.
Do you agree with that? There's a lot of, obviously, on the other side, there's a lot of crypto skeptics who think
Sure.
that this is just another situation that's proof that crypto will never sort of be widely accepted and integrated into the world economy, commerce, and everything like that. Like, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think there's obviously two sides to every coin. My personal belief is that what's happened over the last few months is incredibly healthy. If you have a scenario where an asset class or a set of asset classes is just always constantly going up, I mean, that's not healthy. That's a bubble, right? And so I like to think back to other times in history where you've seen big drawdowns, but maybe the most recent or most prevalent one to think of is like the internet stocks. So when the dot com boom happened in the late 1990s, you had 90% of these dot com bubbles companies go out of business. They went by the wayside. But the 10% that survived not only survived but thrived and now dominate the marketplace. So you've got like firms like Google, that have come out, so on and so forth, right? So I think you're seeing some of the same thing with cryptocurrencies and specifically like blockchain technologies. Is there's a lot of exposure to firms like you mentioned, where you've got like Celsius and Luna and others that were really not run very efficiently or very effectively, and were very bubblicious. But I don't think you see other firms, going by the wayside. You can't really put the toothpaste back in the tube when you have a scenario where BlackRock is now, exposing their asset management business to cryptocurrency exposure, specifically Bitcoin. That's not going away. The industry is not going away. There's too much infrastructure that's been built up around it. There's too much, quite frankly, investment money that's been put into this for it to just go away. I think what you will see is you'll see some regulation come in. It's already starting to come in, and it's going to be required to create a more efficient, regulated, quote unquote, reputable marketplace. But, going back to our experience with Gain Capital Forex.com, the same thing happened with FX, right? So I started working in FX on Wall Street in 2005, and spreads were, fixed at 3 pips on euro, 4 pips on dollar yen, 5 pips on sterling. I mean, you could drive a car through those spreads. And so what happened? Over time, spread compression came into play. It became less egregious, more regulation, leverage came down, and you have what I would consider a healthier market as a result. And so the same thing will happen in crypto. It'll take some time, but this pullback is probably healthy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I see. Yeah, no, definitely makes sense. And I think perhaps on the regulatory side of things, the U.S. Seems to have struggled in the last, I would even say, like 5 years to define what cryptocurrencies are, right? Whether they're a security or a commodity or something like that. And then so you have all of these, you have different regulators in the United States who had trouble classifying this in a unified way, right? The assets themselves, and
Right.
And obviously they haven't come up with any concrete regulation just in terms of trading cryptocurrencies in the United States. As far as I understand, I might be missing something. I feel like from a regulatory perspective, this could actually be in the long run a healthy development, in the sense that, again, it will, the situation shows the underlying issues that could be there, right? Some of the kinks that need to be worked out, and perhaps it's a time when the regulators could actually learn something from this and come out with some sensible regulation, hopefully sometime soon, that will sort of level the playing field for everybody, and we all collectively understand where we're going next, right, in the natural progression of this asset class.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just all about, maturing as a market.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. So we talked about you being an active trader. I wanted to find out: is there anything that you do ritualistically or something like that to prepare yourself for? I'm calling it the trading day. I know you said you're not necessarily an intraday trader, but I would venture to guess that, I mean, you're looking at the markets several times a day.
Yeah. So,
I
so I mean, I
mean,
do have multiple monitors up at my home office, and one of them's always got a trading platform on it. So, although I might not be pulling the trigger every single day, I absolutely have charts up, and I'm watching, a number of different accounts and markets across equities and crypto, FX, etc.
mhm,
The one thing I would say from a ritual standpoint that I do, and this isn't even specific to trading, it's just kind of to life, but
mhm.
I'm a big believer in the power of a coffee. So at the start of the pandemic, one of the I knew I was going to be home a lot more. So one of the big purchases I got was a really nice espresso machine. And so every
Mhm,
morning I wake up and I make myself, I go through the motions and make myself a proper latte. And
mhm.
then if unless it's pouring rain, I always go outside and sit on my front steps, which I'm fortunate to have a view of Manhattan's skyline from where I am in New Jersey. So
Yeah.
I always watch the sun because I'm in I'm west of the city, so I watch the sun come up over Manhattan and kind of take it all in, and then go get to work. So it's very it's kind of iconic, but also I find it to be a good therapeutic experience to start my day and just kind of have a little piece of quiet, see the world in front of me and then go get them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And kind of like the coffee kind of hypes you up for the day, and then
Yeah,
you could probably find some inspiration in those
that's
views
right.
of the sun going up, with the
That's
silhouette of
exactly
Manhattan.
right. I mean,
Yeah.
the World Trade Center is just like perfectly silhouetted there, so it's game on.
Yeah, I do recall at my old times at Gain as well in the Jersey City office, we had a nice view of
Yeah,
downtown Manhattan, and there were times where I had to be in the office very, very, very early in the
yep,
morning, and I would experience the same. It would still be dark, and then all of a sudden the sun
yeah.
would start popping up. It was definitely a
It's
really
surreal.
cool
Yeah,
experience. Yeah,
it
definitely a really
is.
cool experience. Listen, besides Capitalize, you're also involved in some other projects. Like I saw that. I think you're involved in a media project called DTK Studios that's out in St. Louis, where you're originally from. I'm just wondering if that's something that came about for you as a hobby or something that you were doing out of personal interest in digital media or like photography at some point, and kind of
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I've always tried to kind of be multi faceted. So DTK Studios was something that I set up. And so DTK stands for Downtown Kirkwood. Kirkwood's where I grew up in. It's a suburb of St. Louis. And basically, at the start of the pandemic, closest friend of mine from back home, I've known for 3 decades, is a professional photographer. And we kind of realized that at the start of the pandemic, there could be an opportunity to do a lot of drone work and Matterport 3D tours and product photography, because we thought that people would be doing more online shopping, specifically more real estate involved open houses and stuff online. So we set up a company that basically he handles all the day to day operations. I'm very much focused on Capitalize. But we established this in St. Louis as a physical studio. So now we do podcasts, we do 360 imagery for e-commerce. We do a lot of really high end commercial stuff, and it's been really exciting because as a kid growing up, I always wanted to do something to give back to the community and put roots down where I grew up, and then
yeah.
photography and videography and film specifically was always a passion of mine. So, I was always taking pictures, writing movie scripts, always doing things to get that creative outlet that you don't always get trading financial markets. So it's been really exciting. It's done really well since the start of the pandemic, and it's cool to see my buddy running that every single day and really taking the bull by the horns, as they say.
hmm Yeah, I actually have a few friends also that are in the same field. they do specifically product photography, and
Mm-hmm,
it's
mm-hmm.
very interesting to see how much actual work goes into photographing even like think of like even like a just a tube of toothpaste
Yeah,
again
yeah,
for a commercial advertisement, but I mean the lighting has to be perfect and
it
this and
is.
that, it's so much work.
Yeah, it's really like I said. I mean, I'm not the one who's taking those photos. Thank goodness that my my partner and good friend of mine is really at the top of his game. But you're absolutely right. Like, one product might take multiple days to shoot to get exactly right, and there's always, especially when you're dealing with these big companies, there's always styling requirements and very specific guidelines that you have to adhere to. And the cool thing that we're doing now that's really taken off is the 360 images. If you go to a website or on your phone, for example, and you want to look to, let's say, buy a backpack, you may have an opportunity to actually see that backpack and spin through it, toggling it with your fingers and zooming in on the phone. That's what we create now for a number of different companies, and that's been proven to really cause sales and engagement on your website and conversion to pop significantly. So it's been pretty cool to kind of combine the business aspect of things and the creative side with photography.
Yeah, and is that similar to like those 3D effect photos like on Facebook that we were able to post these days, where you kind of mouse over it and you could sort of the picture tilts one,
Yeah,
to one
sort of. I
side or
mean, it's
another?
more. It's more. What it really is it's a stitched together. 24 photos stitched together to make a 360 view of any product that then you
Uh-huh.
can interact with by swiping your finger.
Wow.
So it's just there's a lot of data out there that shows that, especially with the way that people are going. In trading, people are going obviously all into like mobile and online, right? Well, same thing's happening with our shopping habits, right? So anything that's in creating a lift in terms of conversion, all the companies out there are really getting excited about it.
Cool. And so you mentioned that you grew up in, I think, a suburb of St. Louis.
Yep.
I think from our personal sort of communications, I remember you saying that I think you travel from the East Coast where you live
Hmm.
back to Missouri quite often.
Yep.
Do you have like deep sort of family roots there that you
Yeah.
have a deep connection to?
Yeah, so I mean, all of my family on my side, not my wife's side's all in New York, but it's all in St. Louis. All the guys I grew up with, for the most part, are still there. So I just had my 40th birthday last weekend and flew to St. Louis. My wife threw a surprise party there, but it was really cool to see so many people that I've known for literally like 25, 30 years. Some of them even longer than that,
Hmm.
kind of all showed up, and it was really cool to take it all in. But yeah, I love St. Louis, even though I haven't lived there in 20 years. I'm still
Hmm.
very, very much connected to the city and to the surrounding area.
Well, listen, happy belated birthday. I didn't know. I actually,
Thank you,
I
thank you.
actually just turned 40 myself in June.
I know
So,
we're getting old. We're getting old. What can I say?
yep. No, we're growing up. We're not getting old. I,
Yes,
I
there you
wouldn't
go.
say. Come on, 40 is the new 30, I would
Yeah,
say.
I'll take it.
I
I
mean,
like where your
why
head's
not?
at.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so Missouri, I wanted to ask you this. When I
Yeah,
think of Missouri, I know it sounds a little bit stereotypical. When I think of Missouri, I think of the show Ozarks on Netflix, which I'm
yeah,
sure you've seen it.
yeah. Of course, I just
And
just finished it up.
and I wanted to understand or get your take on the way that they portray locals there. I mean, granted, some of the characters or most of the characters maybe in that show that
Yeah,
are intended to be Missourians
yeah,
are from, let's say, a lower class, they're or
yeah.
or income strata, quote
Sure.
unquote. But like, what's your impression of how they portray Missouri, the Ozark region, Missourians on that show? Like, is it accurate?
Well,
Is it
yeah,
exaggerated?
it's certainly a a caricature. So a couple things. One, like I used to go to the Ozarks all the time. Again, very kind of stereotypically, but my dad still does have a bass boat, and we'd go down there and go bass fishing. Me and my brother, and I love it. Like it's one of the most beautiful areas of the country. I've been to 48 of the 50 states. And I can honestly say that the Ozark region of Missouri is on par with any of the natural wonders around the country. I mean, it's just absolutely gorgeous. With that said, it is very, very different than big city. It's very, very rural. People tend to have a bit of a simpler life, a slower life style. But there's something really, really nice about that as well. So I would say how the portrayal is in the show is very extreme and really a caricature of that. But it is quite different than even a city like St. Louis, and certainly a city like New York.
And do you think that the show being around, and it's actually obviously become very, very popular, do you find or do you see that there's actually a lot of sort of new interest in perhaps the Ozarks region or Missouri in general in terms of like tourism or something like that? Or?
I don't know, because I don't live there, so I don't know if there's been a big spike or not in terms of visitors. I will say, like, the Ozark region in general gets very popular in the summer, just because it's not just people from Missouri, but it's people from Arkansas and from Tennessee and a lot of the other surrounding states. That's kind of like the Lake Havasu of the Midwest, right? So it's like it's a very popular destination to go if you want to take a road trip from any of those kind of surrounding states. I mean, Missouri borders 8 states, which I think is the most of any other state out there. So there's a lot of people from Illinois and Iowa and Kansas and so on and so forth that'll go there as well.
And so, since you have such a deep connection to like St. Louis, Missouri in general, I take it, are you like a St. Louis Cardinals fan in terms of baseball?
Yeah,
like
die hard. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you root for any other like sort of local teams?
Yeah. So I mean, all the sports franchises that I root for are St. Louis. However, we lost our NFL team, went to LA a few years ago. So now I root for the New York Giants, because I intentionally root against the LA Rams. But yeah, growing up, I was a Cardinals, Rams, Blues fan, and now it's very much Cardinals and Blues. And we don't have an NBA team, so I don't have any strong affiliations there. I mean, I'd root for the Knicks just out of necessity.
And I know that the LA Rams, as they're known now, I mean, they've had some good success in the NFL recently over the last, however many years. But I think I'm not a very big history buff in the game of American football, but didn't St. Louis Rams during their tenure in St. Louis in Missouri have successes as well? Did they ever win the Super Bowl? Right?
We had the greatest show on turf, which happened when in my high school years. But that's when you had Kurt Warner, who they just made a movie about. But you had Kurt Warner leading the charge as kind of this unknown guy who came onto the scene and just lit it up. And you had Marshall Faulk and Isaac Bruce, and we had a really good run in 99, 2000, 2001.
And Kurt Warner went on to hold on, my football trivia here. Did he went to Arizona?
Yeah,
was he the quarterback at Arizona afterwards?
He was, and then when he retired, he was I believe at the Giants and acted as a mentor to Manning, if I recall correctly.
Interesting.
It all comes full circle.
Right. Yeah. So it seems like in American football, in terms of the personnel, like people that work front office and back office, coaches, and there's so many coaches on American football teams, right? You got special teams coach, quarterbacks coach, running backs coach. But it seems like all of the competent sort of folks, they move from team to team. There's a lot of sort of every year people just moving from one team to another, rather than there's not. It seems like there's not a ton of recruitment out of college football or elsewhere.
Right. Yeah, I think that's fair.
So to ask about, well, it's related to sports and you being an active trader. Do you do you also participate in like fantasy leagues, and maybe even do some sports betting on, because sports betting is now
it's
quite
legal
popular
in New Jersey,
in the US.
So the short answer is yes to all three. So I do play fantasy football. I actually, for a period of time, had a Twitter blog website for DFS fantasy baseball, where I would post lineups and do analysis. But that just became too laborious, and so I just do it now on my own personal benefit. But yeah, I've gone as far as to create spreadsheets and
Hmm.
optimize players and create my own rankings, and then run analysis within the spreadsheet to say like who should I play, who should I not play,
Uh-huh.
so on and so forth. You can really get into it, but I view it as just like another market. Whether it's sports book or whether it's DFS or anything in between. These are all things that like that sort of scratch the same itch.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. I mean, obviously the analysis is different, but it might have some similarities to like financial markets in a sense, like
Yeah, very much so.
stuff that you're used to doing to study, like I don't know, a particular stock that you may or may not
Hmm.
want to
Hmm.
invest in, or looking at historically some currency pair. Could that be sort of applied in some way to a particular player on a particular team?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're still weighing out like risk versus reward, and you're doing some of those same similar type of calculations, right? So, yeah, I think there's some similarities, certainly in terms of like greed versus fear and managing those human emotions. Absolutely.
Hmm. Cool. Here's another question I wanted to ask you. It's another TV show, and
Okay. All
I'm
right.
asking. The reason I wanted to ask you about this is because you worked with me at Gain, right? So
Yep. Hmm.
financial currency broker,
Sure.
and you also did it in London. So you lived in
Yep.
London, and you're a transplant from the United States. I wanted to ask you if you've seen the show. It's called Industry. It's on HBO.
I
Um,
haven't. I've heard of it. I've had a few people recommend it to me, but I have not. I have not watched it.
Ah, I see. Okay. The reason why I wanted to ask is because long story short, it's a hedge fund that has offices in New York and London, I guess maybe in some other parts of the world. And the show really follows um, a few young people who are out of college and are recruited into this hedge fund. Obviously, the way that they're recruited and the way that they're hired into the hedge fund is much different than, let's say, how you and I were recruited or hired at Gain Capital way back in the day. But it sort of follows along with a few characters who are quite young, sort of similar to our age when we joined Gain Capital, and their sort of early years and progression in this hedge fund.
Yeah, so I think the short answer is, I haven't seen the show, so I can't talk specifically, but in general, I think, when you're like 22, 23 and in working in Wall Street, like I was, you can certainly find plenty of things to keep you occupied, and you get enough 22 and 23-year-olds together, certainly you can see how some of these things would play out. I'm sure the
Hmm.
show is a very much a caricature of life, but there's probably some truth to it. When I moved to London, I moved there to set up Forex.com, Gain Capital's UK office with
Hmm.
another guy, and so there was just two of us. So we didn't have the office politics because we created our own office. So it grew from two people to a couple hundred people, but that growth happened over time, and it was, I think we did a really good job of hiring people, and so London was a lot of fun, and I'm sure that some of these things would play out outside of work. But I was very proud of kind of the office environment that we did create. Matt Wright and I, helped cultivate there. So really, really an interesting question. But since I haven't seen the show, I can't give you too many specifics.
Yeah, yeah, understandable. But maybe next time we do a podcast, you will have seen
I
most of
do
it or
feel
some
like
of it,
I'll
and
add it to
maybe
the watch list. It
I
sounds like
highly
something that'd be right
recommend.
up my angle.
Yeah, I highly recommend. I've been watching it. Well, I wanted to actually, we spoke about Gain Capital. We spoke about you're originally from Missouri, but I think you went to university in Arizona, and I just wanted to maybe get kind of find out more about how it is that Will went from living outside St. Louis, probably going to high school, whatever, and then
Hmm.
what sort of led you to go to study in Arizona, and then how did you end up, from Arizona to New York, and then ultimately, all of us working together at Gain.
Yeah, great question. As with most things in life, it wasn't planned out, and when you're young, things just kind of sometimes happen to some extent on impulse or other things. But I actually Went to 4 schools in 4 years. Not because I didn't like any of the schools. I was playing baseball early in my college career, so I was popping around where I could find places to play. And then after my sophomore year, kind of came to the conclusion that I'm 6 feet tall, I'm 180 pounds, I don't throw 90 miles an hour, and so maybe I should look to do something else. And I went on a bunch of different visits to different schools, and really loved Northern Arizona University, which is based in Flagstaff. I love their campus. People think of Arizona, they think of the desert, but Flagstaff's at 8,000 foot elevation, and it's a ski town. I was a big snowboarder, still am, love it. So I loved going there, and coincidentally, they had the #1 portfolio management program in the country at the time. And the cool thing is they took alumni donor money and pooled it together to make basically a couple $1 million portfolio. And then they selected 10 students to manage that portfolio, real money, real outcomes. And so my junior and senior year, I was lucky enough to be one of those students. And that was my first taste of investing. And oddly enough, my senior year, for one of my classes, which was a class on derivatives, they had us open up a Forex.com demo account while I was in school. And so I had a demo account. And then shortly after graduating, I had a job offer from a firm in St. Louis that I turned down because I realized I wanted to try to go somewhere outside of St. Louis. And so I went to New York, saw that Forex.com had a job offering. Remembered them from my college time, demoing the account, and said, maybe this is somewhere where I want to dip my toe in the water, and was lucky enough to land that job. And then basically worked for some variation of Gain Capital and their parent company for the next 14 years. So it was, it's funny how something relatively small, like being in a college class and having a teacher recommend, setting up a demo account for an assignment, can turn into something that changes your entire life, where you live, who you meet, who you marry, your kids, everything. So it's very surreal when you think about it that way.
Yeah, that's really definitely really cool. I didn't know that was your experience in Arizona, and that was like your first taste of in investing and everything. Now I understand why you're an active trader.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been instilled in you since the university days, basically.
That's right. Yeah.
That's awesome. So right now it's the end of the summer. Today's September 1st. Obviously, the fall's coming. Traditionally, for our industry, for the FX industry specifically, the conference sort of schedule is ramping up. I wanted to know, have you gone into any cool destinations in the last year or two for work for Capitalise? And are you guys, maybe not you yourself personally, will Capitalise be attending any of the upcoming conferences that are happening? There's one in Bangkok in September, and then Dubai and London and so on.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So the short answer is yes. Like I mentioned, we were in Austin, we were in Miami. I was in London for the Finance Magnates. We always go to a number of different conferences, and coming up this year, we'll be at the IFX Expo in Asia in Bangkok in a couple of weeks. We'll be at Money 2020 in Vegas in October, and we'll be back at the Finance Magnates in November in London. So we tried to go to a couple conferences a quarter. It's typically me. Sometimes it'll be our CEO as well. But we're working with all the major brokers across asset classes, so we like to get to the events and actually get a chance to talk to people in person. So if anyone out there's listening to this podcast and wants to reach out and connect it, specifically if this airs before the IFX Expo in Bangkok, definitely hit me up on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to coordinate. And I think that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, awesome. I'm not sure if I'm making it to Bangkok, but I will most likely be in London in November at the London Summit. So hopefully you and I could
we'll definitely connect
see
there.
each other there.
I aside from the 1 year during the pandemic when they didn't have it, I don't think I've missed a Magnets in London for about 10 years. So if you're going to be there, I will be there.
Yeah, and I think this year is the 10th anniversary of that event also. Yeah. So it's kind of like comes full circle in a sense. Yeah.
Exactly.
Awesome. Exactly. Awesome. Will, thanks for taking the time to join me today. It was lovely catching up with you.
Yeah, it was great.
We haven't seen each other in a long time. I wish you all the best. Hope to see you in November, and
Absolutely.
Enjoy the last days of summer.
I will. You do the same. It was fantastic catching up with you. And yeah, I mean, even if we don't see each other until November, maybe we can catch up over a beer sometime sooner.
Absolutely. Sure. Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks, Will.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.